Welcome back to another session. I hope you are well. In today's session, I would like to begin a new interaction with you. I prefaced this week in the session I did yesterday by trying to explain how our decisions, both as men and as women, could be self limiting, but also could place limits and obstacles on our path towards success. As I thought about how I could build on the very first conversation, what came to mind was the series that I covered some weeks ago, which was directed towards men, which was titled Relationships the Men Should Avoid. Now, I am aware that I owe the ladies a similar series of sessions. I intend to get on such a task in not too long a time frame. I often try to provide a balanced, not perspective, but a balanced investment for both sexes. The reason being, when one gender or one sex wins at the expense of the other, both lose. And so some of the sessions that I share, I put them across as I would be speaking to my daughter or my son or my cousin or a loved one. And therefore there isn't necessarily a masculine bias, despite the inherent bias that would exist, as I tend to see things from the masculine lens. No doubt I am an advocate for men, but it is my intention for both sexes to find something of value. More importantly, to understand how men think, understand how to deal with men if you are a woman, and understand the game that could be played on you if you are a woman by men. Similarly, I want men to understand how to make good decisions and how to ensure that they are not gamed in the process. So in today's session, therefore, let me draw on something that I very briefly addressed in speaking with my brother. A while back, I was with my brother and we were walking down in a park. And as we walked down, we made observations about the people we saw. People in the park painting a natural and a new canvas from nature. We saw people who were having a picnic. We saw people who were walking, either as loved ones or just friends. And we saw people exercising, and it was useful to contrast all of the people we saw. Now, let me also make it clear, we were not in or on the British shores. We were somewhere in Europe. I wouldn't use the specific country so as not to emote a response. As we walked around and as we interacted with people, I made an observation to him which he noted that he had not observed. I should also note that I was the visitor and he the resident. And I have traveled around Europe into several countries over the past few decades. I have had the opportunity to meet and greet, to wine and dine, and to be with the various cultures and you might even say nationalities or ethnicities across Europe. As someone who is a Brit and as someone who lives in England, these are my people. The English people, the Scots people, the Welsh, and those from Northern Ireland. These are my people. So I understand them slightly more than I do people from across the world. The folks from Africa, but particularly West Africa, and of much reference, countries such as Nigeria or Ghana, I understand them also. And so what I have done over my life, as someone who's been curious about human beings, interactions, relationships, is I have made observations. And sometimes I go back to an observation I made, only to see the observation become part of the data. So in walking with my brother, I made some observations. I wouldn't refer to the country or the people, but I hope you would understand that I intend to use the essence of what I'm sharing to build a series of conversations to help men, but also to alert women to what subconsciously they may not be doing. To do so, let me start with myself. I'll start with my ethnicity, my culture, and my people. Depending on where you are from, depending on where you were born, depending on where you have grown up, there are behaviors and habits that you have, some of which are very obvious, but most of which are very subtle. For example, the English, we have a way of interacting with people across socioeconomic interactions. If I go to another nation such as Zimbabwe, they have a culture unto themselves. If I were to go to Germany or to Czech Republic, or who knows, to India or Pakistan, there's a culture, there is an inherent culture in the behaviors. What we call culture is nothing more than habits executed over time by a greater population of people. What we call traditions are simply frozen cultures. Most people are controlled, therefore, by what I call a paradigm, a multitude of habits over time that has become a culture. And most people are not aware of how their culture empowers or limits or is indifferent in making them go from where they are to where they should be. So, for example, in my case, there are certain behaviors that I would hope that you may have observed interacting with me. I'm not necessarily the most playful person, especially in producing content. I'm not also the most articulate person with regards to sharing ideas. I am not also the most generous with regards to empathy, with sharing perspectives. Sometimes I might come across as too direct. Sometimes it might even seem or sound judgmental, though not the intention. But all of what you're observing is my behavior captured in a video setting, and therefore you have the opportunity to critique, and you have the videos with you forever, so you can go back and you can see the evolution of myself. The reason I use that is just to bring about a flaw that I might have, and that flaw could be intrinsically linked to a culture or a behavior or a pattern that I developed, which might be difficult to break. So, and I'll use myself as a good example. One of the most profound impacts that anyone has had on me, I would say, is my beloved. Phenomenal person. I mean, I know there are no angels on earth, but an incredible human being. Her influence has been very subtle, but the influence has been powerful. When a man and a woman interact, ideally what you want to see is the influence of both parties on the other. If there is too much similarity or sameness, then one party is not needed. But if both parties are open-minded and are willing to take on board the feedback, the criticism, the observations of the other party, then over time, what you should witness is either a moderation on perspectives, a change of behavior, perhaps a tune with regards to communication that is evolving, and therefore the person is ideally advancing towards a better representation or version of themselves. My beloved, has done so in a very powerful way. The reason I share that is to say, there are flaws we have, there are virtues we have, there are vices we have, and as a man and as a woman, in choosing someone as a significant other for a meaningful relationship, you're looking for a number of traits. You're looking for a number of potential markers that enable you to understand whether, in the long term, not in the short term, but in the long term, whether the person will be the right person for you. As men, we do a number of things, but we choose women in a number of ways. Now, let me separate dating from relationships. Dating for me is short term. There is very little I can tell you with regards to dating, because for men, dating fundamentally is synonymous with sex. Short term fun and ejaculation. That's the purpose. That's the reason why men go on dates. Now, I understand that in the West, most men are starting to be feminized, and so some men want to go on dates with women to understand the women and to listen to the women, partly because most men are feminized. We were raised without fathers. We were taught to put the woman's perspective first. But generally speaking, men do not enjoy other men's company, except there is a value exchange. Therefore, men ordinarily will not choose a woman for a conversation, primarily because we run our thought process through our logic, and we can deal with uncomfortable realities. Whereas with a woman, most women are more emotional, and they tend to run things through their emotions. So things have to be said in the right way, and sometimes that risks evading the truth. Men want to be told straight, directly, so we can improve or move on. It makes it difficult, therefore, to have a non-intimate relationship with a woman, all things remaining equal and generally speaking. And what that simply means is, as a man, when you come to a place where you're saying, I'm not focused on dating, I want to focus on relationships, there are three things we tend to choose based on, or the purpose behind our selection and choices. We're looking for a mate for us, a helpmeet for us. Number two, we're looking for a companion for the journey. Now, the first is, you might say, our biological needs. You might say and I use the three S's: sex, serenity, and servitude. Biological needs meaning purely sex. Our physical needs, the need to feel important, the need to feel loved, the need to be in a loving space and relationship, and the need to ejaculate. Someone who satisfies our biological instincts and needs. But then we want a companion for the journey. Someone who we can contend with in the right frame. And that was where serenity comes into the picture. Someone who brings peace. But someone who is unequal from a perspective of a helpmeet, who can push us and make us question things and think about things. But the journey is important. We don't want to be fighting with each other along the journey, because the purpose and the mission is the focus. Now, the third is, along that journey, we might start the process of reproducing. So we are looking for people or someone who is a good wife, a wife being the role the woman plays, but also for those of us who want to be fathers and who want a family, we are also looking for someone who could be and who realistically will be a good mother. Now, can you see that there are 4 different needs a man wants? You want the sex to be great. You want the interaction to be pleasurable. But you want someone that you can actually contend with, and someone who is pleasing to be around and who can be a good companion. But most importantly, someone who's submissive to the mission and vision and purpose under you. We also want someone who will be a good wife, who understands the institution of marriage. And because we intend to bring forward our seed into the next generation, for some men, we want someone who would be a good mother as well. Multiple expectations. The trouble and the challenge as a man is, how do you choose the right person, recognizing that that one person is going to serve multiple roles and functions. They cannot have 100% in every way. What that means is, on a hierarchy of values, you have to determine what is the most important. Now, I'm going to say a few things. Who knows, maybe in 10 years, I might change my position. My observation and my perspective is as follows. As you move through the stages of a man, in the sessions I did some days ago, I talked about women going from maiden to motherhood to matriarchy. You transition through the phases. And even if you do not want to be a mother, you still move into the motherhood phase, where you become someone who can be looked upon for her lived experience and wisdom and her discernment, and who invests back in others. You go through the same phase as a man. The importance of that would be that the younger you are, for example, in your 20s, you're focused on yourself, fun, enjoyment, and a helpmeet for you. But as you get older and come into your 30s, and you get to 35, there should be a shift, because you should have had the opportunity and time for yourself. And you're starting to think, in the event that you want a family, you are starting to think about how that family could be formed. Therefore, on a hierarchy of importance, what you tend to find is that your personal needs, the need for sex, excitement, the need for variety, the need for certainty within a relationship, takes the back seat. And suddenly what you're looking for is serenity and peace. That becomes more important, which is partly why a man can date a woman who is completely broken emotionally, but very gorgeous physically. And if he's dating her, he can contend with her on a short-term basis. The interactions are explosive. She comes over on a Saturday evening and she's with you until Monday morning. Great. The time shared is no more than perhaps 36 hours. You can contend with her for that long. But if you're cohabiting with her for a lifetime or for an extended period, some of her behaviors and characteristics may be too much for you. So what tends to happen is, the man, as you age, he starts to place more importance on peace and serenity. So he goes down in attractiveness, but he chooses someone who has a much higher, what I call, non-sexual marketplace value. She's feminine, she's peaceful, she's a joy to be around, she's an inspiration. She plays the role of a muse. Now, she may not be as gorgeous as her, let's say, younger self, or as other women in the sexual marketplace, but what she gives you is peace. Now, go back in time. The king always had a woman who he trusted with everything. It wasn't always the most beautiful woman. Sometimes it was not always the most attractive wife. It may have been the very first wife. She was a lot older. She couldn't dress in a seductive and sexy way like the concubines or the younger wives, but around her, he could share his secrets. He had peace, serenity, because of who she was. Now, as a man transitions into his 30s and 35 plus, you might want a family, and therefore what you're looking for, therefore, would be the person to bring your genes into the next generation. And therefore, a good mother becomes more of a priority than someone who is attractive or someone who just gives you only peace. You're trying to balance two things, because the moment children come into the picture, your needs as parents take a back seat, and you're thinking about what's best for these kids for the next 16 years, 17 years. So what you tend to find is there's a hierarchy of importance, depending on where the man is in his life, specifically his age. So in choosing a woman, or choosing a partner, or choosing a helpmeet, or choosing a wife, you're trying to balance different expectations and balance different roles. Seldom does a man find a woman who fits all of his needs in abundance. What you have to do is make a choice, but understand the choices you make will come with constraints, consequences, and costs, and you're simply making a trade-off. She's attractive, she's a 10 in beauty, but she has a foul mindset. Emotionally, she's broken. So on a non-sexual marketplace value, she's a 2. She will make a good mother. So you're balancing between all of what makes her complete and all of what makes another woman complete. There's a trade-off you're making. So, and in most cases, you're sacrificing your present desires for your future rewards. The great thing about relationships and dating is when it comes to relationships, the price has to be paid in full. The price has to be paid in advance. But the reward sometimes takes time. So you might sacrifice the present for the future, which is usually the way to think about long-term relationships. Think about the long term, not just like a 100-meter race, the burst of energy. Think about it like a marathon and a life to be lived over time. It's better to enjoy the race rather than start the race very quickly and run out of gas. And most men do not understand how to make that choice. And I'm going to extract from what I've shared so far in the sessions to come, not necessarily a topic dealing with relationships men should avoid, but bring into your attention certain things that you should think about. And I'll close today's session by going back to the conversation I began with my brother. As we walked around, I said something to him. I said, this particular group of people, they're very attractive the younger they are. Once they go past 40, they age very, 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 very fast, and their beauty deteriorates in a very fast way. I said, but that's not the issue. The issue is they have a very hardened face. And there are parts of the world where a woman's resting face or a man's resting face is what we call the B face, the bitch face. In other words, it's too hard. If she's 20 and 22, 25, and she's gorgeous, with a resting B face, a hard face, a face without a smile, she looks like a model. She has the model-esque presence because it's catching. If in many ways it has an aura where you look at the face and you think, is she traumatized? But there's something sexy about it on a young woman, because there's something, you see both the innocence and perhaps the spirit trying to contend with something it cannot explain. The younger she is, it's perfect. But then I extrapolated with my brother and I said, part of the issue with this particular group of people is, if you go back to the Second World War, or Second World Wars, there were certain parts of Europe that were involved in wars and that suffered the most from said wars. A lot of the trauma from the past is something that they still wear and carry 3, 4, 5 generations into the future. So that hardness of emotions and hardness of expression is partly because of what their forefathers and ancestors had to go through, and it was perhaps a coping mechanism. But in this world we live in, where there's been relative peace, time has not diluted that expression or that hardness of spirit. And therefore, in choosing a woman like that, she will be the best, the younger she is, because you can show her off to your friends and everyone wants to be with her. And most women want to aspire to have maybe a quarter of her beauty and her presence. But as she ages, the deterioration is fast. And in addition to that, the hardness, as she moves from wife to motherhood, is transferred. So I made a reference and I used an analogy and I said, have you noticed that said group are not very expressive with their children? And as we talked about it, we said, and he acknowledged, that his observation has been some of these women tend to prefer men who are expressive from other nations, who either talk a lot or who were raised to be very vocally expressive and funny and entertaining to compensate for what they lack. There's nothing wrong with that. The point being that subconsciously some of these women understand what they do not have, and they're looking for something to balance what they do not have. The most important part of that was this, and is this. If you're looking to have children, recognizing that about 70 to 80% of our communication is body language. Even as adults, we need about 70 to 80% body language. But for children, in the first 7 years, most of the communication, which is nonverbal, exceeds 70 to 80%. The child doesn't understand language just yet. So he goes by expressed emotions and the resonance, the vibration, the frequency of energy surrounding the parent. Now, the great thing about it is parents can mask facial expressions. They cannot mask the energy they radiate. Because everything vibrates. Energy vibrates. And I can walk into a space and across the room, despite not speaking with you or to you, I can pick up your vibration. I can do so with intuition. We're all spirits, we're spiritual beings. We live in a physical world. We have a mind or an intellect. On the spiritual level, I can pick up the energy you're radiating because I am pure energy. You are energy. And sometimes the vibration, the state we are in, comes into resonance with another form of energy or comes into disharmony. So I said to my younger brother that it's important to understand that while she might be fun as a wife and as a girlfriend, as a mother, she'll make a horrible parent, especially in the formative years of the child, because she's not expressive. Her body language doesn't exude love and intimacy and affection. She might be kind. She might have been raised to be dutiful in the servant's roles that women of old used to play, such as cooking and cleaning, but she's not inspiring with her words. She doesn't know how to use her mouth. She doesn't know how to connect emotionally because she's void of emotion from years and years of not knowing how to express emotion. And therefore, with the child, what you tend to find is the mother plays more of a nurturing role earlier in the years of the child. And if you as a man are not nurturing, then what you have is a mother that cannot provide the responsibility and role that women generally are expected to provide, but also a father who is not very nurturing. The child will be emotionally void over time, primarily because he hasn't seen play from the father, emotions expressed from the mother. So, in choosing the right partner for long term, especially if you want to have children and a family, you're taking into account not just what you like, but you're also bringing into the picture a question that most people tend to avoid. That question is a simple one. It goes as follows. Where is she from? Who are her people? What is her ethnicity? What nation was she raised in? What environment was she groomed into? Are they expressive? Are they open? Are they happy? Are they kind people? Not is she kind. I'm talking about her people. Because what tends to happen sometimes is the traits skip a generation. And make no mistake, if she brings in children into the world on your behalf, she will bring forward, except and particularly in the absence of a very firm purpose and focus from yourself as a man, she will bring to that child all of the traditions, from her people and all of the expressions into the child's life. If it's a culture that is very expressive, you'll get a lot of expression. If it's a culture that is not expressive, you get very little expression. What you're looking to do as a man, therefore, is during the dating phase and the vetting process, you're trying to choose people who are open to recognizing that both parties, man and woman, whilst great as individuals and whilst great when dating, may need to make some alterations when it comes to being parents. That openness allows for growth and improvement, but most importantly, it requires introspection, reflection, and critical appraisal. Pain plus reflection can lead to progress done in good faith, and if both parties are resistant of said observations, it's only a matter of time. I bring full circle to myself, and I'll tell you why I use myself as a good example. Depending on where you're from, my ethnicity, going back to West Africa, depending on where you're from, my people, I would use the word, are not very expressive. The women are, the men are not. So as a woman trying to choose a man from where I am from, you would want to pay attention and vet, not the man himself, but his people. Many years ago, and I've made this mistake once. Many years ago, I said to a number of friends that I think one of the first things a man should do when you're dating someone and thinking of transitioning to relationships is to meet her parents, meet her father and meet her mother. And what you see in the mother is most likely going to be what she will be in the future, except she rejects her mother's spirit at a subconscious level and chooses a different path. And what you see in the father is more likely to be exhibited in the son, except he rejects his father's spirit and path and chooses one for himself. We become our parents because biology and genes plays a huge, strong role. Now, this is not to say nurture and nature don't have something to say. Sometimes people stick to their biological genes. Some other people are influenced by association through nurture. But it is important to go back and vet. So, for example, and I close, say you find someone who is ethnically Caribbean, or ethnically Sudanese, or ethnically from, let's say, Algeria. There are localized traditional values in the men and the women. It's important to go and vet and understand where they are from, understand their history, understand their struggles, understand their pain, understand their challenges, so that you can extrapolate and make subtle corrections in the person's, your dating's behavior, and allow what I call a windage factor, a margin of safety. Because we tend to, it's called the regression principle. We regress back to our parents as we age. We started very gregarious and flamboyant and excited and passionate, but over time we start to regress, which is why you could have met me in my younger days, and I may have been more expressive than I am today. Reason, I'm going on a path towards becoming my father. And the question for a woman normally should be, do I like what his father was at 70? Because that's who he might become. Not will, but who he might become. Let me bring today's session to a close, because I think I've covered what I hope is the broad perspective. As the sessions follow, without necessarily, and perhaps I will, I might just, it's hard. There are several countries around the world, several nations, several tribes. In Africa alone, there are over 5,000 tribes, despite having fewer countries. In some countries, in Africa, there are over 100 to 200 tribes in one country. It is definitely difficult to make a broad generalization, even within a country, because there are so many cultures or subcultures within that country. What I do not want to do is say, well, I'm going to focus on one country and leave out another. What I also do not want to do is assume that I know everything about a particular country, because I will be speaking from anecdotal experience, which is not necessarily always accurate when you're making broad generalizations. So what I will try to do is extract both my lived experience, my observation, my interactions and conversation, and the data, and try to present something that most men can use as a reference in making a selection, but equally importantly, most women can be aware of, so they can know how to start introducing subtle changes to ensure that they do not become like their mothers. I have spoken to many women before, and I've asked the question, would you like to be a mother when you get to your mother's age? Some have said yes. Some have said no. Some have said they do not know. And some have said they are indifferent. As a man, if you're choosing a long-term partner, it's important to pay attention to some of the subtle, unspoken gestures, some of the subtle influences that may be lurking in the background at a subconscious level that you and her are not aware of. Ladies, as I go through these sessions, I will try to integrate the opposite, which is directed to help women. But I would like you to take what I'm sharing for men and invert the principle and see how it can be of some value to you. And I hope it will.